John Sutter was an imperfect genius. Sutter's dream was to recreate what he grew up in, which is the genesis of the German Industrial Revolution. His goal was to take that German agricultural industry to the Sierra Nevada watershed and the Sacramento River Valley with the same steam and water wheel power into the American Industrial Revolution that culminated in the transcontinental rail yards in downtown Sacramento with the largest industrial complex west of the Mississippi. And what I'm going to demonstrate to you is something that George Hurst is quoted in his autobiography of saying, which is that what happened here in Sacramento was the greatest economic event in the history of the United States as of 1891. And I think you'll realize that really clearly when you see some of these videos. Sally and I have been through this building and seen this actually in action, and this is unbelievable. 1791. This will blow your mind when you see this. Washington built and operated this thing himself, obviously with his people. About a half a mile from here, on the American River, where it bends at what's called the Fairborn Water Plant, which is kind of directly across from Home Depot and Folsom Boulevard, is where John Sutter's gristmill was. And his gristmill was designed to do just exactly what that gristmill did. And 30 Mormons were building it when they struck gold in Coloma. Those Mormons marched back and forth trying to find gold on the American River, and funny thing, they found it at Mormon Island. For those of you who don't know where Mormon Island is, it was in 1853 a town of 2,500 people, and today it's right under Folsom Lake, and it's right adjacent to the Folsom Power Station. Moving on.
Saugus Iron Works is the first successful iron foundry in the United States. Originally called Hammersmith, it began operations in 1646. Taking advantage of the nearby Saugus River, the water was used not only to ship and receive goods, but for power by damming it. Hammersmith consisted of a blast furnace for producing pig iron and gray iron, a forge where pig iron was refined into wrought iron, and a 500-pound hammer that was used to make merchant bars. There was also a rolling and slitting mill where flat stock that could be used to manufacture nails, bolts, horseshoes, and other products was manufactured. When operational, Hammersmith ran for 30 weeks of the year and produced 1 ton of cast iron per day. Despite this, however, due to the high cost of labor, financial mismanagement, which may have included embezzlement, and a number of lawsuits, it seldom operated at a profit.
See that big water wheel right there?
Hammersmith was closed around 1670, less than 25 years after it opened. The property was more or less abandoned, and overgrowth quickly reclaimed the area. He managed to uncover the foundations of buildings, remains of the blast furnace, the 500-pound hammer used in the forge, and a water wheel that powered the bellows for the blast furnace and more. The Saugus Iron Works was opened on September 18, 1954, the first day of Saugus's 3-day celebration of the town's 325th anniversary.
So, and Sally and I went through that just north of Boston. It's about 40 miles north of Boston. And right close to that is another spectacular site.
The owners of the Pawtucket Waterway sold their entire
This is a textile mill. Which started the employment of women on a massive scale in this country.
Textile factories while living in England. studied a little more closely than their owners seemed to realize. And thanks to his, well, industrial espionage, Lowell was able to recreate a functioning mechanized mill just outside Boston. The machines were powered by belts connected to rotating shafts along the ceiling. Those shafts, in turn, were driven by a massive flywheel in the basement.
And in the early 1800s, the way you got one of those great big flywheels up to speed was with one of these. The same kind of water wheel that had been driving grain mills in Europe since the Middle Ages.
And that's why, after Francis Lowell's death, his partners brought his mechanized mill design to the Pawtucket Falls. It offered enough power to drive dozens of these wheels. Other entrepreneurs took a chance and followed their lead, and the newly incorporated town of Lowell quickly went from rural backwater to the biggest manufacturing center in North America.
Their gamble paid off. Making cotton textiles in automated factories was faster, cheaper, and more precise than doing it by hand. So demand went through the roof. But there was a catch. In order to meet that demand, factory owners had to find thousands of workers willing to take on grueling 12-hour days and 6-day weeks.
As it turned out, girls and young women flocked to fill these new factory jobs. Boyden studied the latest French water power systems, called turbines, and then modified their intakes and outlets to bump up efficiency. His design performed so well that it blew the old technology out of the water. In the coming decades, mills around the country ripped out their medieval-style water wheels and replaced them with ever more efficient turbines. Productivity just kept rising, and the innovations behind it spread like wildfire. The cost of manufactured goods steadily fell while quality continued to improve. It was the dawn of the American Industrial Revolution.
That was 1821, just for the record, because Sutter didn't get here until, in Sacramento area, until 1839. He got in the United States in 1834. So this is kind of gives you an idea of the footprint of what I would call the steam power, which was started with Watt in 1769, and the water wheel power operations.
The mill wheel at Molesey is a cast iron wheel, believed to date from about 1820, and was designed by a French engineer, Poncelet. He worked for Napoleon and came up with the idea of using thin metal to make mill wheel blades, thus getting maximum power out of an undershot wheel. The mill at Molesey contains evidence of two sets of stones. There may have been a Peak District stone and a French stone set, so they could mill different grades of flour.
In Greenfield Village at the Henry Ford, the Loringer Grist Mill teaches us that lesson. Mark Gruther is chief curator, and he took me inside to show me how this mill, built in 1832 in Monroe, Michigan, used a mechanized system to grind grains, such as corn and wheat, into smooth, fine flour. First step is to pour the grain into the mill's sub-level hopper.
Nice.
Next, the grain is scooped out of the storage cellar by a cup elevator. The cup elevator is a pulley system powered by the water wheel outside the mill. The cup elevator then brings the ground corn back upstairs again, here to what is called a bolting reel.
What's going on
here?
Well, this is called a bolting reel. So what's happening here is the grist that's being ground downstairs has come up, it's being passed through here. This is like cracked corn, so this is very, very rough. But this is slightly better, and then that is the finest grade at the other end. So this is sifting it, it's falling through.
And from the bolting reel sifter, the various grades of corn flour drop down into bags on the first floor of the mill, just a stone's throw from where the corn was ground.
Whoa! This is so fine.
That is quite a transformation, isn't it?
It's so hard to believe that this began as corn kernels.
Right. And now it's silky smooth, isn't it?
This was the technology that John Sutter grew up in and was trying to begin to recreate here with the agriculture that he had already developed, and he was trying to move into the industrial aspects of that thing with the two water wheels that he had in place to build the sawmill and the grist mill. This will explain this to you, the paper business, okay? Crazy. Sutter worked in a place like this in Basel, believe it or not. to remind you of the old days before we had these dryers, honestly. The drying racks. How about that, huh? Isn't that a kick? Reminds me of the clotheslines from the 40s and the 50s, right? So this is the Rhine River Valley that Sutter grew up in, right? There's 3 countries there, France, Switzerland, and originally it was Baden, now it's Germany. But I wanted you to see the breadth and the depth and the impact of the Rhine River and the bend that he lived, because he lived where the Black Forest is. I'm going to tell you a little story about where that Black Forest is, and that's exactly where Kandern is right there. That's the Alps, Basel, which is Switzerland, and that is, and this area is exactly where, and that's where Sutter worked it, by the way, before he left. So this is what the whole geographic area looks like on a normal map, but I kicked it to this one so you could see that is actually the footprint of the Rhine River agricultural valley. Look at the scale of that thing. So I've been up and down that river. I've been on boats. I've watched boats go. They're industrial-sized boats. That's a very serious river. They can bring, not quite ocean size, but great big giant boats shipping up and down the whole thing, 2,000 miles, honestly. This is what it looked like at the time Sutter was there. 1815, 1820s, mostly paintings because there was no photography at the time. But I'm just flipping through these real quick. And then I'm going to show you something. This is going to shock you because this is actually a steel factory.
Reservoir sits about 400 feet above this structure.
This is the physics.
And then it's dropped down into the Knight's wheel that powers this whole building.
A 400-foot drop of water at 8 pounds per gallon.
Right.
That creates a fair amount of power.
Depending on the diameter of the pipe, then you get different head pressures on the drop, and once it came into the building, the main power for this building back then was a 42-inch water wheel that was invented by Knight.
The building that came from, that video came from, believe it or not, it's about 40 miles from here, in Sutter Creek, California. Okay, and it's still in operation today as a museum. That's what Kandern looks like. It's a little tiny kind of a hamlet in a small little valley. This is Sutter's home and the factory, the paper mill that he was working in Kandern. And the big building is the mill, and then the little one in the back there is basically where he lived. This is a side view of the house. It kind of gives you the split there, a little bit of a split between the front and the back, the house and the factory type of thing. When I realized that Sutter had a water wheel and a paper mill attached to his house, I thought, boy, that guy had that whole industrial dynamic baked right into his DNA. And I'm sure that had a huge influence on his life, recognizing that was what was driving the whole valley, the whole Rhine River Valley with the water mills and steam, because the steam was very prevalent too. This is from Zollinger's book. You see the Black Forest right there? This is another little personal start of the story for me that's going to crack you up. And this is right over the Rhine River in France. This is the largest train museum on the planet. It is 3 times the size of the California Railroad Museum. It is 650,000 square feet. It kind of gives you an idea of the industrial neighborhood that Sutter was in. France was very industrialized. Germany was very industrialized, and they were in a competition with each other. And, of course, Switzerland was a whole different animal. It was both. It was probably the most elite educated area on the planet, the Swiss at the time. And then they had the industry to go with it, but it wasn't at the scale of France or Germany. This is Peter Volker, who lives on John Augustus Sutter Street, and his friend Roland Kaiser, who works for Roche Pharmaceutical Company, which is at Basel, Switzerland. I'm going to show you the Black Forest because Peter lives right on the Black Forest, which is on John Augustus Sutter Street. And if you walk out the back door of his house, you're in the Black Forest. This is some of what they do on the Black Forest hiking trails. This is the way they display the wood and tell you the history of it. And this is how they do that. Those are hinges, right? You can open and close them. You can actually count the little circles and that type of thing. They open it up and tells you the story of the tree. I mean, this is on the walking trail. Isn't that cool? I mean, we could use a little of that around here, don't you think? There's a hammock out there in case you just want to kick back on the trail and swing in a hammock right there. This owl is something that they do. They carve that kind of stuff and have it displayed on the trail. Can you imagine how cool this is? Think about how committed to the Black Forest these people are and how beautiful all of that is. And it's all hand carved, right? Okay, this one is going to blow your mind because I believe that John Sutter probably actually worked in this building.
A real mill. Are they still...
Swiss guy, by the way.
And the mill is still going. Spherical boiler. Yes.
That's a boiler.
It's amazing. Just by putting boiling water and spinning it with atmospheric pressure, 3 to 5.
That's a water wheel driving it. So here comes Sutter's journey. He leaves in 1834, okay? This is a little booklet that we produce here at the Historical Society. And we have a couple other variations of this, but this is where he begins. And he leaves from Basel, from that city that building was just in, and working in a paper mill at the time. He left there and headed for America, and it was a goal to get here. He came through originally New York, and then he got down to St. Louis, spent about 2 years there. This is the Missouri River, which of course leaves from St. Louis and works its way around Jefferson City. He ended up in Independence. He was there in 1837, and these pictures are from actual photographs taken in Independence. That building right there was built in 1836. Sutter didn't get there until, I believe, early 1837, but that building was just brand new when Sutter was there. This is probably how he traveled, just for the record. And then he took off on the Santa Fe Trail for 2 years, back and forth, down from Independence on trading adventures to try and make some money. He had very successful on the first one, made a lot of money. Second one, not so much. But more importantly, wherever this guy went, he picked up supporters and he picked up information, and he was like a magnet for absorbing all this information. And on that second trip, he learned that you could get a free land grant in California if you went there and settled on the property. That was the theory of the Mexicans at the time, and so they were issuing land grants. Sutter was hell-bent on getting to California. So he starts out of Independence. This is kind of what that looked like, and he left with a bunch of fur trappers and missionaries heading for Oregon. And this is about what that looked like, as you can see. So this is the three trails that developed, right? You've got basically the Santa Fe Trail, the Mormon Trail, which they also call the Mormon Trek, tied into the Oregon Trail. This is what the Oregon Trail looked like back in those days with all these different stops, right? And I have a bunch of pictures of these along the way because I've actually been along that entire trail. This is Fort Laramie, what it looked like back then. And it was the major trading post that the Indians and the military occupied, and it kept peace along that route, right? This is Fort Hall, and what that looked like about that time. That's gone now, by the way. This is the new version of it. They rebuilt it, and that's the junior version of it. But that was a place where if you look here, this looks like the inside of Sutter's Fort. So every place Sutter went, he's picking up ideas of what he's going to do when he gets to California, right? So you can see all these different rooms here, and you know the similarities to Sutter's Fort are extraordinary. You have to admit. This is the Whitman Mission, which subsequently had a massacre after Sutter came through there probably about 20 years later, right? But there was missionaries, right? And they had a little bit of an overwoke reaction from the Indians, and that ended up killing them all. But next stop, Hudson Bay Company, and the Hudson Bay Company is in fact Fort Vancouver, and Fort Vancouver was the major destination. It was established in 1825, and it actually became a major trading post out here. And it's obviously a National Historic Site right on the Columbia River, and that's pretty much what that looks like today. And you can see the proximity to the Columbia River, and that's the fort from a distance today. And then this is kind of the wrap up on the trails, and we're moving off into a new thing, but I want to give you an idea what this all looked like. That blue line to the right of California there is the Mormons coming back after not fighting in the Mexican-American War, but they went all the way down there, and then the march back to what became Salt Lake City in 1847, established by Brigham Young. So this is Sutter's journey after he gets to Fort Vancouver, which is quite interesting. I've got two maps of this. This shows the journey that John Sutter took to get to California. I mean, he gets up to Fort Vancouver, and he gets them to front him the money and the trip to get down to Hawaii because they told him that would be the fastest way to get to California. And that is no joke, okay? That was the shortest route for him to get to California because you couldn't go over through the Cascades or the Sierras because the Indians would take care of you for certain. And so that's why nobody went that way. And so he went to Hawaii, and he hooked up with a sea captain by the name of Eliab Grimes, his son Hiram Grimes, and another employee that worked for them, John Sinclair. And believe it or not, they worked out some kind of a deal. So Sutter can, once again, here he is. He gets these guys to backstop him, and he leaves there with 10 native Hawaiians that are called Kanakas at the time, and a couple of other people that goes with him. And again, he had convinced these guys that his dream of this grant was the real deal. Eliab Grimes, the sea captain, who was the equivalent of a Robert Gray or a George Vancouver or a James Cook type of sea captain. He was a worldwide trader. Sutter cuts a deal with this guy, and this guy gives him all these people, but the deal is, okay, you pull this off, you got to give me a grant too. And it actually happened. He goes back up to Sitka, Alaska as a supercargo, the guy that was sending with the ships that Grimes gives him. He takes trade goods up to Sitka, Alaska to who? The Russians. And that's where he meets the Russians, okay? And he ends up, sweet talking the hell out of those guys too. They actually backstop him as well. And so they agree to give him trading goods and things like that. But they just happen to own a little place not too far from where he's trying to go. It's called Fort Ross. And they have sheep and cattle and all kinds of crops and all kinds of things going there. And it hasn't been the greatest experience in the world for them, but they were very open and sharing. And so they kind of backstopped him initially too. And they asked him to drop some goods off to Fort Ross on his next supercargo trip, right? He takes stuff for Grimes over from Hawaii to Alaska, and then he takes stuff from Alaska down to Fort Ross, drops it off on the way to what became San Francisco and then Monterey, okay? So I just put this up here to give you an idea of what he walked into. This is what the Sierra Nevada looked like in terms of just the mountains and the forestry in the mountains at the time. This is obviously the watershed, right? All those rivers, and that became very important very quickly because you'll notice that Sacramento's at the bottom of that picture, and all of those watersheds are north of Sacramento. And that ended up with Sutter settling, and he actually came back. He got it up the river. What evolved out of that in 1841 by way of what's called the Bidwell-Bartleson parties, the first guys to get a wagon over the Rockies and into California, and that opened up the original trade that broke off of the Oregon Trail and started down to California. And so this is the American River watershed. And then this was the gold rush thing, and you can see by year the impact in the yellow there, that as it started ramping up, right? This is the last of the trails, but look at the gold fields, right? That's what happened. All the gold fields were around Sutter's, Sacramento, Michigan Bar, Mormon Island, and north. This is what that Feather River watershed looks like. Probably the most dynamic watershed in terms of velocity and distance in the world. I mean, so much water, so many channels coming down all at the same time, that's why the Yolo Bypass is 3 miles wide, okay? This is all of the rivers that got Sutter's attention, just for the record. So this is his grant. It's the hand-drawn version that morphed into becoming a little more official, but it's a strange-looking thing. And what makes it so strange is all it does is cover 5 rivers. 5 rivers: the Feather, the Yuba, the Bear, the American, and the Sacramento. Why would he do that? Right. Water wheels. This is Sutter's Fort. This is Sutterville that he dreamed of doing. That actually was above. It was not in the waterbed at the time. It was at much higher altitude. And he told them at the time, you can't build where you're thinking about building in what is today, where we are pretty much, because it floods every year. Along comes Sam Brannan. Brannan is a guy who comes out. It's really crazy. They started out in New York, then they went to what is today Ohio. He got kicked out of there, went to Missouri, got kicked out, went to Illinois, got kicked out, and the last place he left was Nauvoo, Illinois, just 70 miles from Abraham Lincoln's home in Springfield, while Lincoln was in Springfield. So he knew all about the Mormons. This is the ship. He was the supercargo on a ship called the Brooklyn that left and went, and that's a kind of a painting of it. And this is the route that he did to get here, right? He came in San Francisco Bay on July 31, 1846. He just came out of New York Harbor, goes around, ends up going into a harbor, again, kind of like what happened with us in the Rhine River, is this about 5 times the size of New York Harbor. That San Francisco Harbor, Bay Harbor, is incredible in terms of the scale. There's probably nothing like it on the planet, honestly. And this is what it looked like for them coming out of Nauvoo, okay? And this was the combination of all that thing we just did with the various trails, and then the Mormons going back on the Red Line, and then they also went up through Sacramento, and that's how they ended up here in 1848 with the 30 guys about a half a mile from here, and then the other ones up at Coloma that found the gold. And then these are the various sites today along the Mormon Trail that they stayed at. And this is the Mexican Cession of what it looked like. They just happened to land exactly at the same time in early January 1848. And then the gold rush hits in January 1848. And then this picture is painted in the summer of 1848. And from that moment on, all hell breaks loose, okay? And it starts with this water wheel right here. I got 2 videos left. Here we go. This will crack you up. This is a dead match for Coloma Sawmill and how it works. I took the sound out because it was super noisy. That's the real deal. This guy comes with the act. But that's how that worked. And then this is the last one, okay? I thought you'd get a kick out of this, right? This is a real deal. This is what he was building right over here at Sac State. Just exactly this grist mill. So, just to be clear, so you understand we're saying the same language here. We live in a world today that where the technology is accelerating so fast that in the next 5 years, the Earth isn't going to be this country isn't going to be anything like it is right today. And so we've put this program together fairly quickly to make the point about the genius of John Sutter, what he grew up in and what he was trying to do. He was very successful at it. I'm very excited about this for John Sutter's reputation and for Sacramento's impact on the world.